History happened everywhere. A random country, a random time, and a topic pulled from the hat. Then a week for one of us to go and research those things and come back and tell us all about what they've found. Welcome to History Happened Everywhere. Welcome to History Happened Everywhere. I'm Ryan Weir, and with me in the studio, as usual, is the lovely Peter Goddard.
Prithee, sir, and welcome. I've been inspired this week by my topics, hence my greeting.
Oh.
I should say no more.
I can't remember what your topic was, so why don't we have a listen back and find out what it was that you got thrown up by the Durslater.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Get the Durslater going.
All right. Okay, so here we go. And your country is... Austria.
Austria. Oh, that's good. I've heard of Austria. I even know where it is.
Okay, Durslater, here we go for your time period, and the time period is... 1400 to 1500.
Oh, I think that feels pretty doable.
And the final piece of the puzzle is the topic, and the topic is... art and culture.
Oh, that's good. I feel this will be easy. I've been wrong before, but this feels like quite achievable.
It's
Vienna,
not
culture, Austria.
Right. So there we go. Art and culture in Austria from 1400 to 1500 AD. So Pete, how have you been?
It was more challenging than I was expecting, to be honest. I thought this would be a walk in the park, but it was a scramble through the mud in the park.
Yeah, like you'd think middle of Europe, Austria, in that period, 1400, 1500, loads of stuff's happening, all sorts of art and culture being devised.
Yeah, I found it tricky, but let's see. I think I found some good stuff for you, but let's find out.
So, Pete, it's New Year's Eve.
Is it?
Well, not for us. No, not at the time of recording, but at time of listening, it's New Year's Eve because this episode goes out on New Year's Eve. So.
Okay. The awkward interlude out of the way.
Yeah. Okay, we should talk about Austria.
We should.
In the 15th century.
Yeah, it's very much the point of this entire enterprise today.
Yeah. I think I know where Austria is.
Go on, you tell me then.
It's in Europe.
Good start.
No, that's it. That's
Right, okay. So, yeah, then a good start and a middling finish, I would have to say.
Well, no, I covered Austria a bit in the Hungary episode. And, so I've got some sort of understanding of where Austria is. But not at 1400. Maybe it moved.
It did not move. It's not like one of those more floaty countries you've heard of.
Like Ghana.
Atlantis.
Yeah.
Ghana, yes, indeed. No, it's a Republic of Austria. It's very much in Central Europe.
A republic.
It is a republic. It's kind of a long, thin little thing. Well, relatively thin. Landlocked. It's sandwiched between Germany in the north and Italy in the south.
Okay.
So kind of really just smack in the middle of things. It's got some Alps, some
nice
mountain action going on, sharing a border with Switzerland on the western side.
Yep.
And it's also kind of the bridge to Eastern Europe. So it's got Hungary, Slovenia and Slovakia on the eastern side.
Wow, it's quite a few people around it.
Bit of a sort of central crossroads of a place, actually, which does kind of affect what we're going to talk about.
Normally, you'd expect big powerhouse countries to be by the ocean or by water of some sort.
I think its advantage in this instance was it's almost a crossroads of a place. So a lot of stuff is coming through, so it gets to benefit from all those things and accumulate all these differences. That's my theory.
Oh, that's a good theory.
The flag, you might be familiar with their flag. This is apparently one of the oldest national symbols.
Okay.
Or it's considered to be. It's a red band with a white band in the middle and then another red band at the bottom.
Right, yes, okay.
Now, according to legend, I'm going to digress here, even though it's not my time period. That flag was apparently invented by Duke Leopold V of Austria during the Siege of Acre. So this is in the Crusades.
Okay.
And basically, after a big battle, his surcoat, his white surcoat, was drenched in blood,
obviously.
And he whips his belt off to have a shower, presumably. And he noticed that his surcoat had red and then a white band where the belt had been.
Yeah.
And a red band under that. And that inspired the red, white, red combination that became the Austrian flag.
Okay. And when was the Crusades?
That was the 1100s, I want to say.
So we're about 300 years after that.
Yes.
I don't know. I like whether or not I would be happy having a country that the flag is literally
Blood of the infidel.
bathed in the blood.
Yeah, they probably don't advertise that so much nowadays.
Probably not.
Landscape-wise, we're talking alpine. You've got rolling green hills, mountains, lovely lakes, little wooden chalets, that kind of thing.
I see that's very similar to sort of Switzerland, as I imagine in my head.
So, and this is kind of the part of what made this quite challenging was it's quite Germanic. They speak German. It's quite Swissy, where they also speak German. It's got the Alpine element, which is quite Swissy, but also Austrian. And it's North Italian as well. So when you're in northern Italy, you'll find everything has that kind of Gothic script and just looks Germanic. So it bleeds into the countries around it quite heavily.
Yeah.
Yeah, now size-wise, I would imagine you're wondering. France.
Yeah, how many Frances in an Austria?
You get 7 Austrias to a France.
Oh, that's much smaller than I thought.
Yeah, it's quite small.
I thought it was
surprised.
I thought that was like equal in size.
Yeah, so you were talking powerhouse nation. It's actually quite small. A bit of
7
add-on.
Austrias in France.
7 Austrias.
Okay.
9 million people.
Today?
Yeah,
Or
today.
right, okay. 9 million?
Yeah.
That's hardly anything.
Right? Well, they've got Vienna and there's Salzburg and some towns, but it's just not a big country is the long and the short of it. But for not a big country, boy, does it punch above its weight.
Yeah.
Let's talk famous Austrians.
Okay.
Anyone leap into mind?
Well, Adolf Hitler, right?
Yeah. I was going to keep him for last, but yes, he is the...
He's
one,
my go-to answer for any question about Austrians.
Yes. Also, here's an interesting one. Marie Antoinette was Austrian.
Not French.
Not French. She was Austrian.
Oh, okay. What was she doing in France?
I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect she married her way there.
Okay. That sounds like a question for
Voice of the Internet.
Fact check Charlie. Determined to make that stick.
Ms. Internet. With some respect, sir.
Fine.
Hello. This is the voice of the Internet. Marie Antoinette was born the Archduchess of Austria but moved to France at the age of 14 when she married Louis Auguste, the heir apparent to the French throne. 4 years later, her husband ascended the throne as Louis XVI and she became queen. Thank you.
Mozart.
Yeah.
Famous for his balls.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I wondered why you just shouted Mozart at me then for a minute. And then I remember we were talking about famous Austrians. Yeah.
Yes, Mozart and his famous balls are...
Wait,
Austrian.
what? His famous balls?
If you ever go to Austria, they have chocolate balls, which have Mozart's portrait on. And
Okay.
they're quite well known. They're Mozart balls.
Okay, right.
But they
I'm
are...
glad you qualified that.
Well, I don't know.
Because I was thinking Hitler again.
You get more chocolate with the Mozart. Let's put it that way. Musically, wow, what a bunch of people came from there. Strauss, Haydn, and Mozart. Gustav Klimt, the artist, came from there. Freud was Austrian.
Not musical, though, eh?
No, well, he may have been. I don't know. Maybe he was a mean blues player. Who knows? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, Austrian, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was told that Arnold Schwarzenegger's accent in Austria is considered to be like super rural and like a big old farmer. Like
really?
Yeah, like it's laughed at as being like the dumb accent.
Is that like the Bristol accent for Darth Vader that Dave Prowse had?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think most countries have an accent that everybody looks at and sort of rolls their eyes.
Bumpkinish, right?
A bit bumpkinish, yeah. And I think that Arnold Schwarzenegger's accent is that one.
Come with me if you want to live.
You had to really struggle for that one, didn't you?
I've been on record as saying I'm terrible with accents. We'll be back, my love.
Be back.
And notably, you realise this place is quite alpine when Wikipedia, in their famous Austrians, has an entire section headed Mountaineers.
Oh, wow, really? Okay. Well, that makes sense. You got the Alps and stuff in there.
I hadn't heard of any of them, but I guess in the world of mountaineering, these guys were the big deals. I struggled a bit about famous Austrian things. Wiener Schnitzel.
Was he a mountaineer?
He is a veal cutlet with breadcrumbs.
Oh, okay.
So that's where we are. Now when we are. So 1409, so we're doing 1400 to 1500.
Yep.
In 1409, the council at Pisa elects a new pope, Alexander V. That's not particularly interesting, I grant you, although they did forget to ask the other two to resign, giving them 3 popes, which they'd never had before. Viking-wise, the Vikings, as we recall, were kind of Christianizing at this point and kind of disappearing. The Viking settlement in Greenland ends. They just sail off and go to Norway.
It's not a tremendous long time ago, is it?
No. There's,
like to today.
Well, it's also when you think the other things that are happening. So the other thing, particularly, you've got Henry V in the UK. He succeeds his father and have the Battle of Agincourt. So knights and battles and cry God for Harry. And knights and things like that.
Right.
That's all happening at the same time. And in 1480, the Moravi Confederacy is formed by Bantu tribes. So this is a kind of a kingdom forming over in Africa. So it's not all European action.
Cool.
And then just one other thing to help you orient in. This is a time where Leonardo da Vinci was alive. So if you think about all his inventions and the paintings and how people look, then that's the period we're talking about.
He was in that film Titanic.
He was. He did that terrific drawing of the new
Kate Winslet, yeah.
Yes, so that is the when. That's hopefully giving you some sense of what's going on in the world. And here we are in Austria.
1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, hey, ho, ho, hey, hey, hi, hi, ho, hi, ho, hey, ho, ho, hey, hey, hi, hi, ho, hey, ho, ho, hey, hey, hi, ho, hey, ho,
So we're talking Austria now, just to give a little bit of context. I don't want to do too much history. We had the Romans there in the 400s or thereabouts and before. After the Romans, there's various tribes battling around, so a lot of fluctuations. Eventually, there's a thing called the Frankish Empire, which is, again, a sort of various interconnected kingdoms under one larger kingdom. That includes Bavaria and the area we're looking at. Then in the 10th century, you start to get some sort of faintly identifiable Austria happening. That's an area that is ruled and given to the Babenbergs.
Right.
Babenbergs, that sounds like you're ordering a cake with a speech impediment. But this was known in German as the Eastern Realm or the Osterreich, Austria. So you're starting to see Austria happen in about the 1000s or thereabouts. Then there's lots of fuss and bother between various people who will argue that they own the place. It gets split into areas under Louis the German, which is okay, but it could have been worse. West Francia was under Charles the Bald. Everyone's kind of has cool nicknames at the moment. There was Arnulf the Bad, Henry the Quarrelsome, and Leopold the Illustrious.
I wonder if they had a say in what their surnames would be, or whether or not it was sort of chosen on their behalf.
I would imagine Arnulf the Bad, also known as Arnulf the Evil, probably didn't have too much to say about that. I think it's almost the case that if you try and embrace a nickname, it will never stick.
Certainly not if you're the Bald. Ryan the Bald.
Ryan the Bald.
I wish to be known as Ryan the Bald.
Which does, you can imagine Leopold the Illustrious kind of going, just keep quiet, just keep quiet. So this becomes the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, which isn't really an empire and isn't really Roman and isn't that holy. It's a kind of fluid set of kingdoms that I'm not going to go into here because it's lots of back and forth between boring dukes and stuff. But we're ruled by the Babenbergs. And eventually, of the last of the Babenbergs, Frederick II, who is the quarrelsome, he dies. How do you think he dies?
Arguing.
Yep, in a fight, in a battle with the Hungarians.
Oh, that's right. Okay, cool.
So I guess sometimes your nickname picks you.
I mean, you named it for a reason, right?
Yeah, well, quite so. So then it falls into the hands of the Habsburgs, which you may have heard of.
Yeah, well, we spoke about them in the Hungary episode.
Absolutely.
Which was right back at the beginning, early days of History Happened Everywhere.
Right back then, yes.
I think when it was called History Happens Everywhere.
It's caused confusion ever since.
Yeah.
But yes, the Habsburgs take control. So these guys actually stay in place for an extremely long time, right up until World War One.
They really did hang in there, didn't they?
They had some tremendous staying power. You have to admire.
It's a lot of power.
So,
you'd imagine at some point there would have been some errant son that would have ruined it. Some son that inherited the Habsburg Empire and was like, I'm just going to drink and do nothing.
That does seem to be the pattern in a lot of places, isn't it?
Right.
How they hung on for so long is, I'm sure we'll find out in another session. But yeah, so, and to talk to our specific period, basically, I'm not going to talk about politics or anything like that, but more or less, this century we're looking at was a lot of fuss and dispute about who owned what. For a while, the Austria was split up into lower, inner, and further Austrian territories.
I mean, you've got a lot of countries bordering you, right? That's a lot to have to continually keep your eye on. Who's crossing the border? Whose border is it? Like trade disputes and all that sort of stuff.
And this is part of why I struggled, actually, with finding things out, because there's just so much back and forth between places, and a lot of the history is just, frankly, really boring territorial dispute.
Yeah.
And you've got the Hungarians who are invading and bothering them, and the French have a row with them later on. And there's just so much traffic that it doesn't really settle down as a place for quite a long time. So yeah, it's a nation in turmoil. It's a crossroads of a place that's got connections with the Mediterranean, and that's why a lot of what we're going to talk about today isn't super identifiable as specifically Austrian. It's because Austria really absorbed all these influences from all around Central Europe and the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. So you get a really, I would say generic, but almost classic medieval feel about the whole thing. And then we're going to have a look at some specific things about art and culture. Right. So the main thing I wanted to talk about is probably looking at the culture through music and sound. So the noises and the musics and the instruments of the period.
Okay.
So I want to take a trip to Vienna with you, Ryan. In fact, specifically, I would like you to trip to Vienna as a wandering minstrel.
A wandering minstrel, right? Okay, because this is medieval times, right?
There's towers and castles and cathedrals and all the classic
witches and warlocks
and probably goblins. We don't know. May have strayed off the path there. I don't know.
So this was Middle Earth you're talking about, right?
Okay, so it's you arrive
minstrel.
at the gate. You're a minstrel and you arrive at the gate.
Okay, what kind of instrument do I play?
Well, we'll come to that.
Oh, yeah.
You've arrived at the gate because it's a walled city. I'm going to take you on a slight digression here about the walls themselves. So you remember we talked about the Crusades?
Yeah, briefly,
in
yeah.
1191, there was a battle in a town called Acre in northern Israel. There was a Crusader victory, and at that victory was King Richard the Lionheart of Britain and Leopold of Austria.
Together, hanging out
and winning.
Right.
But then after they won, they had a bust-up, real big bust-up.
Oh, right.
And Richard the Lionheart ordered the banner of Leopold to be chucked over or taken off the ramparts of the conquered city.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so Leopold gets well cheesed off, and he leaves in a big strop. So then Richard doesn't care about this until it comes time to go home.
Right.
Due to various reasons, which I won't go into, about closed ports and such, his route takes him through Austria.
Okay, where he's just disrespected Leopold.
He very much upset Leopold, and now he's making his way through Austria relatively tentatively, I would imagine.
Okay.
Now, by legend, the locals are aroused with their suspicions when an unfamiliar coin is used in a tavern, which promptly stimulates Leopold into action, and he captures and imprisons Richard the Lionheart.
What?
Right. So he then hands him over to the Holy Roman Emperor, a guy called Henry VI, and he ransoms Richard the Lionheart off for a massive ransom.
To who?
Back to his home country.
Oh, okay.
So he says, "I've got your king. Do you want him back? Give me a absolute barrel load of money."
Oh, that sounds cool.
Right?
Good idea.
So this is so bad that England had to introduce a special tax to pay it.
Oh, wow, it was a lot of money, was it?
Now, have a little think. Put together special taxes. Richard the Lionheart has to be ransomed off.
Yeah.
This is Robin Hood time, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Sheriff Nottingham going around going, give me your money.
For this tax to pay the ransom to bring Richard the Lionheart home, and I'd always thought it was because the infidel had got him, but it wasn't. It was the Austrians.
Oh, okay. So he's being held in, where was it?
In the Holy Roman Empire. So he was
okay, right. So they took him south.
Well, they covered all of Germany. It was a big area. The Holy Roman Empire covered a lot of Central Europe.
Right. Okay. Because in Robin Hood, Sheriff of Nottingham didn't like Richard the Lionheart.
Yeah, I mean, there's versions, isn't there? But I mean, these are the historic facts.
He was probably skimming off the top.
I'm sure he
adding an extra percentage,
doing his bit, right?
Sheriff tax.
But yeah, so or certainly a version of this is that the tax that was upsetting everyone and that Robin Hood was finding very unfair was actually the very tax used to buy their king back.
So do you think that they had the money to pay the ransom, but they thought, well, we'll just get the people to pay it? Or do you think we don't have enough and we need extra, so we're going to go to the people and ask them?
I think the cynic in me is saying they probably could have paid by asking all the nobles. Well, probably did ask the nobles as well, didn't they? But I don't know. Let's say they're all nice people and they just needed the money to get the lovely king back.
Okay.
Personally, I'd have left him, but there you go. That's just me.
Right.
I can run the place. It's fine.
Yeah.
I know I was interim, but I'm ready to take on the proper role. But anyway, the reason this is relevant is because the money that was used to pay the fine or the ransom was used to build the walls of Vienna.
Oh, no way. Okay.
So now you've arrived at these walls. These walls have been bought and paid for by the ransom of Richard the Lionheart.
Relatively new as well. 300 years old.
Yep, relatively new. Same walls are in place, and they'll stay until Napoleon shows up sometime later.
Okay.
So you're early. You're waiting for the gates to open. Because obviously there's no point in having gates if you're not going to leave them open all night.
Knock, knock, knock.
Oh, you let the invaders in again. So you're going to be heralded by a trumpet. The trumpet will announce the call to open the gate.
Okay. But they do that every time somebody turns up at the gate?
Well, I'll tell you a little more about trumpets after we've had you piped into the city. I don't want you waiting outside the city, Ryan.
Okay. I imagine I'm going to dance my way into the city, by the way, as a minstrel.
Understood. Okay, so here is a trumpet.
Ah, that's kind of cool. So I'd be... Right. Right, okay. Cool. I just want to come in, mate.
Welcome, Ryan.
Oh, it's still going again. When do I move?
Welcome. Well,
he's having a laugh.
He's got a trumpet and he's going to use it.
I just imagine me creeping across the drawbridge.
Like, no, back, get back.
They had more time, didn't they, in the past?
It's a long drawbridge. You've got to get across.
It's still going.
Well, he's finished with a flamboyant low note there.
It was a low note, wasn't it? Well, now everyone in the city knows that I'm here.
Well, that's precisely the point. So there was a number of things that the trumpeters would potentially do. And these are tower trumpeters. One is to declare the opening of the gate and the closing of the gate, but they might also trumpet in particularly notable people. Okay. So everyone is supposed to know you're in there.
I mean, I'm not very notable, right? I'm just a minstrel.
Yeah, you were walking behind a duke who was walking in. So
okay, that makes more sense.
Taking advantage of their fanfare, I think.
Okay, cool.
So welcome to Vienna. Just a little more about trumpeters. They're quite a respectable kind of musician, unlike you travelling minstrel, you dirty wanderer. And these guys could have acquired full citizenship. Obviously, the history of trumpeters is quite connected to the military because trumpets were primarily useful for their ability to be heard on a battlefield. So used for directing people around the place.
So is that the note such that over the clanging of the metal and people shouting and stuff, it can still be heard? Like, other instruments maybe would get drowned out if it's a specific type of note or tone.
Well, I think that trumpets are particularly useful because they have that sort of piercing quality and you can play lots of different tunes. But I guess other instruments have been used. They had, actually in the medieval era, they distinguished between haut and bass instruments.
Right.
Haut being basically high, but actually loud, meaning loud. So things that would be outdoor use, and bass or bass being quieter indoor things that you'd have more, you wouldn't be able to hear in a crowded market, say.
Right, okay.
So that was a clear distinction they had at that time.
Yeah, I guess so. Plus also it's quite lightweight, I imagine, if you're carrying onto a battlefield. You're not going to be taking a double bass with you, are you?
Exactly. It's the amplifier that really weighs you down. So in 1440 in Vienna, they paid trumpeters to have a whole page in the accounts just for trumpet bills.
I don't understand that. Say that again.
So the town has trumpeters. These are city employees. So in 1440, there's a whole page dedicated to the accounts for trumpeters.
Oh, okay. So there were many of them?
I don't know how many of them are. They're just expensive, I guess.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it could have just been one person with lots of expenses.
Could have been one guy with a load of receipts. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
But you can still hear, if you want to hear a trumpet call today, you can. Not in Austria, but in Krakow. Krakow, is it?
Krakow, yeah.
In Krakow, in Poland, in their main square, since the 1400s, they have had an hourly trumpet call, and they still do today. Right, so you're going to want to go to church, obviously, because you're a God-fearing minstrel.
It's the first thing I would want to do, yeah.
You want to just thank God for
letting me in.
And getting over your journeys, which, if you came over the Alps, was probably no mean feat.
So I'd have pretty mean feet as well.
So you're going to direct those feet to St. Stephen's Cathedral. This is the main cathedral because you are a minstrel with huge ego and you think they're only the best church for you. And as you approach, I'm sure you'll be hearing the bells.
Oh, I feel all Christmassy.
Crunch, crunch,
Santa's
crunch.
on his way.
Through the snow you go, you dirty minstrel. And they jazz it up a bit.
These are some nice sounding bells.
Right?
Sounds like an old grandfather clock.
And so I should probably specify these aren't actually St. Stephen's bells, these are some bells, but they are medieval sounding, so it would be something like this.
Okay.
So, and then you cut the bells.
Okay.
And the bells are playing while you arrive in the church, but you've come to the church. This is one of the most significant landmarks in Vienna. It was actually founded in 1137, but as with sort of big civic buildings of that time, people tend to add bits to it, and so the main bit of it was rebuilt, and the South Tower, which is the very tall spire that it has, which is probably the most distinctive part of it.
The cathedrals tend to be the tallest of the buildings, right?
Ah, yes, absolutely.
So
well,
you'd probably be seeing it from miles away.
Very much so, because the South Tower was completed in 1433, smack in our period.
Okay.
It's a big fancy spire, very much part of the modern Vienna skyline, but back then was very much dominated the Vienna skyline, and in fact at the time it was finished was considered the highest in Europe. But yeah, so the other thing this is culture again. So remember, we're talking about art and culture. St. Stephen's Cathedral is, and specifically the spire and the tower, is representation of a very significant architectural style in this period, which is the Gothic.
Oh, okay.
So the Gothic, I would describe the spire of St. Stephen's as like an angry wedding cake. Lots of flourishes, and it's very tall. Obviously, it's 136 or just over 136 meters high, and you look at the tower, and it's a classic piece of Gothic architecture apparently. So how do you recognize Gothic architecture? Do you know any idea about that at the moment?
Only from Batman, so I like Gotham. So arches and curly bits on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dark colours.
Arches and curly bits. Less so the darkness, but it's a kind of grandness. It was size. It was the medieval buildings had very thick walls because they needed to be thick to be tall, because they were self-supporting. So you're starting to get architectural developments that mean you can make bigger buildings with narrower walls. So the things you'll start to notice are towers and spires, bigger windows, more space, vaulted ceilings. Okay. So do you know what a vaulted ceiling is?
Pretend I don't.
Okay, so if you imagine a roof, a ceiling at its most basic is kind of 4 pillars and a flat surface, and that flat surface is the ceiling.
Yeah.
If you then turn that flat into kind of an arch between the pillars, then you've got the start of a vaulted ceiling.
Okay.
So imagine a row of pillars with arches between them.
And then the roof curved over the top of that.
Roof curved over the top of that. That is a nice vaulted ceiling you've got.
Nice.
Gives you more space and, again, that sense of grandiosity.
I mean, when you think that this is 1400 and they're able to achieve that level of build, it's quite extraordinary.
It really is.
Without cranes and without any sort of modern health and safety.
Yeah, very few high-vis and hard hats in evidence, I would imagine. So other really recognisable features of Gothic architecture are your arches. A classic arch, you might call it, is like a semicircle in the archy bit.
Yeah.
These are pointed arches. So if you think of those windows where you've got the nice spiky point at the top of your arch, that's a very Gothic feature. But the other really distinguishing feature of Gothic architecture is the flying buttress.
I was going to say the flying buttress.
Right, so in fact, I'm going to challenge you to describe a flying buttress, because I've really struggled with doing this with words rather than pictures.
Okay, so they're attached to the ceiling of the lower floor, and they attach to the higher parts of the outside of the building to support the roof and distribute the weight load of it.
Exactly correct. So you did beautifully, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, so you've got the weight of the roof, you've got thinner walls, so now this wall is going to start buckling outwards, and to prevent that buckle, you put the bit of a beam that then leans onto a column, essentially, and that distributes the weight, the outward weight, and pushes it into a downward force in the pillar outside.
Yeah.
And that is another absolutely classic piece of Gothic-y architecture.
Yeah, mate, I finished building your cathedral.
Are you sure those walls are quite stable?
No, those walls are not stable.
Wow, it's Captain Buttress.
That's right. You need buttresses on those walls. Come on down to Buttress, Buttress, Buttress. We've got walking, running, leaping, flying buttresses. They're flying off the shelves. Whatever your project, we've got the buttress for you. Large cathedral, we've got buttresses. Small cathedral, we've got buttresses. Medium-sized cathedral, we've got buttresses.
Wow, thanks, Captain Buttress.
And that's not all. Buy one buttress, get one buttress free.
Terms and conditions apply. Offer limited to one free buttress per cathedral. Full details at www.buttress-buttress.com/buttress. So, anyway, back to our soundscape.
Yes.
You're going to enter the church, and maybe there's a bit of singing, some monks perhaps chanting their celebration of the Lord.
Okay. You're pointing at me, so I'll play
the cue.
I'll play the tune.
Ryan on the decks. Classic monk, right?
Someone's got some clogs on.
There's always some workman in the background. But you might find that was a particularly religious instance, I suppose. There's also a slightly poppier sound available from the time, so the choir might do something that sounded a bit like this.
It's kicked it up a notch, hasn't it?
Right, this is the disco beat.
You just hear all the old monks tutting in the background.
You can hardly hear the words.
Well, it's not real music.
Just noise. So this is the music of the educated, the cultural elites. They would be singing these kinds of songs. But the other thing that's really notable about the culture of this time is all of the art, everything, the religion is soaked into everything. So even your pop song like this, very religious sounding, as you can tell.
Super religious, yeah.
And people say we mock around. But we're too busy singing to put anybody down.
Religious as in Catholic, right?
Yeah, well, there's 3 popes, right?
Yeah, but what does that mean, though, there's 3 popes?
Well, there was for a long time 2 centres of the Roman religion, I believe. And I want to say Constantinople and Rome. I may be wrong.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly in the Portugal episode.
Yeah, I think
There was an east and a west, Rome.
Yes, exactly. I think the third one was an anomaly of the time. Let's disregard him. I think having 2 popes was not uncommon.
Okay.
But yeah, we're talking about Catholicism.
Okay.
So you have a pray. You're a minstrel. You're like, thanks for getting me here safely, God and friends. Probably just God, actually, thinking about it.
And friends.
Also God, as it turns out. That's what the Trinity is all about. God and friends, all God.
God and Friends is like the kid-friendly cartoon version.
I'd watch
God
that.
and Friends.
I'd tune into God and Friends.
Sacrilegious.
So now you're going to head out and maybe go into the market and maybe get yourself an apple, I don't know what you eat. What you like to eat as a minstrel, Ryan?
Fish.
Fish. Okay, well, let's see if there's a fish. Of course,
Tasty,
you're in
dry fish.
super landlocked Austria, but okay, we'll see if we can find you a fish in the market. So you're wandering around, and the places where musicians could perform were officially regulated, but quite diverse. So they might be playing in the street or the market square. They could play in houses. They might play in churches or in your local castle. So you might find people playing music out and about on your journey through the market.
Yep.
And probably what you're going to hear is these, I referred to before, these haut, high, loud instruments. So one of these is a very classic sound of the medieval era instrument is the shawm, S-H-A-W-M, which is kind of a pre-oboe. It's a long tube with a flared end, and it sounds a little bit like this.
Man, that's so medieval, isn't it, sounding?
Right?
There's no modern noise that's like this.
The only thing I could think of was like sort of snake charmer pipes.
Yeah, like modern noise.
Well, if you don't buy modern snake charming music, that's not my fault. So that's a shawm. You might also hear a slide trumpet, which sounds quite a lot like the trumpet that we heard earlier. I'm not going to play it, but this is a period where your long, thin, flared trumpet is starting to also evolve into a curvy, bent-over trumpet. So the beginnings of the trumpet that we know today. Yeah. So a slide trumpet is a kind of looped version of that. Sounds a lot like the earlier trumpet, so I'm not going to replay that. But also there's the pommer. So this is another really medievally sounding thing. It's more clarinetty, another woodwind kind of instrument, which sounds like this.
Depressing, isn't it?
It's a bit gloomy. Which is ironic, because I've got notes that say it was moderately jaunty. It also says kazoo sounding.
It does sound like a kazoo. It looks very similar to the previous one.
Yeah, it is very similar.
They've got a big bulbous end. And it's like a recorder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or like an oboe or something.
But it's a vibrating reed, I think, that you're playing through. So these guys, obviously, you could do a solo. It could be just one endless shawm solo. But actually, very commonly, the slide trumpet, the shawm, and the pommer would come together and be found playing as a band, as it were, known as the alta capella.
In public? So in the marketplace, they'd be playing this? Or is this much more sort of indoors? And
I think I'm going to say a mix. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I wouldn't bet my life on it. But certainly, typically, these three would play together, and it would make a sound a bit more band-like, such as the Bobic Blazon, which we'll hear now.
Oh, the Bobic Blazon.
The Bobic Blazon.
That's my favourite of the Bobics.
It's a cracker, isn't it?
Yeah.
And coming in at number 3 in the hit parade, it's the
Bobic Blazon.
Yeah, it's not easy listening, I would
It's really not. It's kind of hurting my ears a little bit.
So we go, okay, band, I will give you 5
man, they need more rehearsal.
pfennigs to stop.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because I imagine in a marketplace you might probably have some sort of little band or something that's playing for money. Like why wouldn't
it could
you?
be, right? And these are the haut, the loud, the outdoor instruments, which I think is partly why it's quite difficult to listen to in an indoor setting. It's much like the bagpipes. It's intended to be a little further away and a little more to cut through. And if there's nothing to cut through, then it becomes quite harsh to listen to, I find.
Yep. That's the best explanation of a bagpipe I've heard, by the way, as to why they've got that reputation of being annoying.
Well, also astonishingly, it's something we're going to talk about, because let me talk to you, Ryan, about the doodle sack.
Oh, not again, mate. You showed it to me last week and I told you need to go see a doctor.
It's not that, and I deny everything. The doodle sack is another word for a bagpipe. So it turns out that bagpipes, you think of them as a Scottish instrument. There are Irish bagpipes as well. Actually, throughout Europe, you can find the bagpipe known as the doodle sack.
Which is a much better name, by the way.
Right? I would. If someone said, do you want to hear the doodle sack?
My doodle
I
sack.
do want to hear the doodle sack. In fact, why don't we hear the doodle sack?
This is the sad bit in a sword and sandals film
Absolutely, right?
where the wife has just been killed in front of your hero.
I was going to say the wife was killed. I
Yeah.
think we've watched the same movies. There's a fresco in a church in Slovenia, which is an angel playing a bagpipe. Although I would argue the definition of angel is someone who has a bagpipe but doesn't play it. So it's not as loud as the Scottish one. It's a lot more like the Irish bagpipe, I think, this.
Oh, it's just so sad,
Quite mournful, isn't it?
isn't it?
I think it's that sort of hum, the underlying hum. That's like, oh dear.
My heart is just...
So let's bring this down then,
broken.
because oh my lord, I'm getting sad now. So, let's. You're a minstrel. You've prayed. You've wandered through the market. You've purchased some fish.
thrown a coin at a band.
You've thrown a coin at a band. You're going to go to the pub. I think it's time.
Okay.
There might be a minstrel playing there if you're unlucky. Someone like Sting, presumably. And hopefully there's nobody there. You can make a bit of coin playing your instrument. You asked earlier what your instrument is. And your instrument, I have decided, is what I think is the medievalist of all the instruments, the lute.
Oh, the lute. Yes, I can see that.
So let's hear you on the lute, right?
Doing a little dance on a lute. Okay.
I fancy you. You've got
fancy
some
me.
skills.
All right, here I go. It's kind of Mediterranean-y.
Using a few chords. Lure us in. Oh, I love this one. Take it to the bridge.
It's romantic, isn't it? You'd catch
gentle,
the lady's
isn't
eye
it?
on this one.
You would. Well, especially you saucy minstrel.
Thanks, man.
So perhaps you want to take a break and let someone else play for a bit. Because there are some other exotic sounds that you need to let some of the other minstrels have a go, Ryan. Don't hog the stage. It's open stage night at the Vienna Arms.
Yeah.
So here are some instruments that there were some things that people would be familiar with today, which I didn't really want to bring along because you already know them.
Familiar with them.
But you might not know the zinc. Now, the zinc, also known as the cornetto.
For real? So for those who don't know, a cornetto is a ice cream here in the UK, probably across Europe as well, with like a waffle cone with ice cream and a flake chocolate stick.
No, the zinc, it's a bit of a hybrid instrument. It's a wind instrument, usually made of wood, covered in parchment, with finger holes, a bit like a recorder. But its mouthpiece is like a trumpet, which gives it a kind of a weird trumpety, clarinety mixed sound.
Woo.
So let's have a quick listen, just a little snippet of the zinc. See what I mean? It's kind of
I love it.
clarinety, but also trumpety. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
This is my favourite so far.
It's gentle, isn't it? It's nice, smooth sound. Bring back the zinc, that's what I say.
Well, where have they gone? Where are all these instruments?
Fell out of favour, I guess, because there were better instruments available. This, probably the clarinet maybe replaced it.
Yeah, this has kind of got a fluty kind of feel to it.
It's nice,
but it's
isn't
got
it?
bass to it, like a deeper tone that's...
And obviously this isn't a visual medium, but they look kind of awesome as well. They've got this sort of curve to them.
Yeah. Yeah, they look like organic. They look like a horn off a cow or something that's been...
Absolutely. Side note, they did also play horns from cows, put some finger holes in them and used them as instruments as well. But I didn't bring any sounds of that.
Makes sense.
I did, though, think maybe you're really rich and you've got a fancy instrument, you're indoors, because this is a very quiet instrument. You might want to have a go on the clavicitherium.
The clavicitherium.
Yeah, I did have to read that several times. Clavicitherium. So the clavicitherium is like a folded harpsichord. It's a keyboard, like you would imagine a keyboard. But as you would see in a piano, normally the strings go out horizontally.
Yeah.
Just 90-degree bend, vertical strings right in front of you. It looks like it kind of fits on your lap. I'm not exactly sure. But it plays like a keyboard and it's... So
you'd carry this thing around. This wouldn't be like a fixed piano or something.
I think so. I'm not exactly sure how big it is because I didn't have a banana for scale. But
yeah, okay.
It looks portable-ish.
Well, okay. So on this website you've just sent me, there is a picture of somebody playing it.
Oh, cool.
Like a painting from 1463. And they are literally playing it, and it looks body width.
Lappish, right?
Body width and about height-wise, maybe like half a human body. But yeah, you're right. I didn't understand what you meant about vertical and horizontal lines. It literally, you play it upright. It's an upright piano rather than it lying out in front of you.
Yes. Now, while we listen to this, do you know the difference between a piano and a harpsichord?
Okay, I think I do, actually. So...
Great, let's move on.
One is, so the piano has a hammer, which when you press the key, it hits the string. And when you are a harpsichord, it plucks the string.
Correct.
Come
Absolutely
on!
correct.
I'm the winner again!
You're on fire, my friend.
I'm doing well today, aren't I?
So here's you on your clavatherium showing off your silky skill.
So this is a plucker,
This is a plucker.
not a hammerer.
It's very much like a harpsichord sounding.
It's not got that same resonant tone as a harpsichord, though.
No, it's a little thinner, isn't it?
Yeah,
Which makes sense because it's a lot smaller.
it is a lot smaller, yeah. It's like a kid's kind of piano. You imagine little kids playing that?
Yeah, for sure. Now, the final instrument, well, not quite the final instrument. The final instrument in the bar, because you're going to move on after this.
Yep.
Is quite a complex one. I wanted to bring it because it's really different to all the other instruments. It's really complicated. And I've called it the duck-billed platypus of the instrument world.
Okay.
Because it seems to be made up of loads of other instruments made into this weird instrument of its own.
Cool, man. I love this. I love that there were people inventing all of these things, that they had the time to sit there and be like, I think I'm going to come up with a zinc.
I've got a plan, right?
Yeah.
So this thing, it kind of looks like a violin. Your basic shape is a violin in that there's a kind of wooden box with strings over it.
Yeah.
And now on one side you've got a crank. So by a crank, I mean, when you start one of those oldie-worldy cars and you turn the kind of rotating lever.
Yes.
That's the crank. So there's a crank on one end of this box and then there's strings laid out.
Okay.
And then along the strings of what would be the neck of if it were a violin, there's a little wooden keys. So there's kind of a keyboard and a crank.
Oh my gosh.
And so the neck is really thick. It's got like, I don't know, imagine 3 or 4 times the thickness of a violin neck.
Yeah.
So you've got a key. So you've got a crank on the right hand. Well, let's call it. I'm right-handed, so I would sit this violin-looking thing on my lap, and there'd be a crank in my right hand that I would rotate.
Yeah.
And then I would, with my left hand, play the keyboard that is along the neck of the violin.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And with your mouth, you pull the strings?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit like that because this is one of those challenging rub your stomach and pat your head kind of affairs. Because you're doing a rotating movement with one hand whilst playing keyboards with the other hand. And the way it works is, I've never come across an instrument that has a wheel before. The crank turns a wheel.
Okay.
So instead of on a violin, you would draw a bow across the strings.
Yeah.
But there's a wheel underneath the strings, and the keys push the strings down onto the wheel.
Oh, I see.
So the wheel kind of acts as your bow, this continuously revolving bow, essentially. And your keyboard is you're pushing the strings down onto the bow. And the reason this is useful instead of just, why don't you just have a violin, is because there are other strings just slightly further down the body of the instrument, which use a continuous kind of humming noise, which gives you this background buzzing kind of noise. And then
this is so engineered.
It's super engineered. And then there's this one other string sort of on the other side of the machine, which you can use you can move the crank in such a way as to kind of tap this string to give you a kind of rhythm section onto it as well. So that all sounds really bizarre. So I'm just going to let you play it. It takes about 30 seconds in before they start using this extra rhythm string. So it will sound a bit like an underlying buzz with a normal violin on it. But listen for the string that then the rhythm that starts to come in.
Okay.
Also, hurdy-gurdy, what a name.
Is this what it's called?
This is the hurdy-gurdy.
I'm sure it wasn't called that in Austria though, right? Did it have a name then?
Dreiler.
All right, cool.
So you can hear that constant noise underneath.
You wouldn't think this was one instrument.
No, there's so much going on with it, isn't there?
At this point, they might as well throw in a couple of cymbals and maybe a triangle dangling off it. Just keep going.
Bass drum on your back.
This feels almost Asian to me.
Yes, I think it...
Like Russian.
I think it came from Arabia, actually.
Right.
I need to check that.
There you go.
So now you've got the extra string
That does
kicking
something
in.
bad to my head.
It's your soul talking.
Oh, no. This is...
So all this is one person, just with one crank going around in one hand and the keyboards going in the other. Slightly mosquito-ish, isn't it?
I was happy with it up until that weird mosquito noise.
So that is the hurdy-gurdy. Which...
There are people definitely out there still playing that today.
Oh, it's a very common instrument. Well, not very common. It's, it's in parts of America. I actually thought it was an American instrument.
Oh, okay.
It's found widely, put it that way.
Okay.
There are modern hurdy-gurdies. It's still
Yeah.
played. Obviously not as common as the guitar, but
I wonder if
it
there
is
are,
not
like-
a dead instrument. It's not like, it's quite different to the shawm. I don't think I've ever come across a shawm or a
Zinc.
or a zinc before, and I think those are gone. The hurdy-gurdy is very much alive.
Oh, no. I mean, they're not gone. None of these are gone. There'll be people out there that have recreated these and have got little orchestras going.
No, but the hurdy-gurdy is alive and modern. There are
Okay.
hurdy-gurdy players who are not just I don't think there are shawm players out there in the way that the hurdy-gurdy is really...
This is terrible because now I've got a whole YouTube rabbit warren.
Yep,
I'm going to
there's
go
your
down
rabbit
a
hole. You enjoy that, but
hurdy-gurdy, hours lost listening to people in South America playing the hurdy-gurdy and so on. Anyway, yeah.
quite a haunting noise, I think. So
I love it. It's great.
That was just a selection of the instruments that I found that you don't really see today that I thought would be interesting to learn about a little bit today.
I'm disappointed that's ended. I was really enjoying that. That was great.
Well, it hasn't, because you, sir, are now done with your job for the day. You're going to want to dance, aren't you? I know how you are.
Well, I'm a minstrel.
You
That's
want to go
what I
clubbing.
do.
You want to go clubbing,
Music
my friend.
is my life.
So you want to have a bit of dance. So you are going to go to the hot party in town where you're going to cut some rug to the one-handed flute and drum.
Wait, the one-handed flute and drum.
One-handed flute and drum. This is an instrument. Well, it's two instruments. It's a drum and a flute, as the name suggests.
Yeah.
But one person plays it.
Okay.
And this is a much more upbeat, dancey number. So when you get to the club, the DJ will be on the flute and drum, and it'll sound a little something like this.
Okay. This is much more gentle dancing than I was expecting. You led me to believe.
It's just warming up. This is one person.
Yeah.
Woo!
Fair maiden, wilt thou danceth with me?
No. Okay, so not quite the hard rave you're expecting, but
No,
a
not
little
at
bit, a little bit jauntier than the more haunting sound I think we've had largely up till now.
It was fine.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your visit. So, as with the fading sounds of the one-handed flute and drum, not a euphemism,
Yeah.
you're exhausted from dancing.
The one-handed flute.
You head back to your room and wonder what tomorrow will bring. So all of these samples are real. The tunes are actually from the 1400s as well. So
Yep.
that was, as you could tell, not modern music played on old instruments. That's authentic, in inverted commas, music with authentic instruments. So I found all these things. They're real 1400s tunes from or thereabouts anyway, from a project called Musical Life of the Late Middle Ages, with a website which is musical-life.net.
Nice.
Yeah, they were really helpful. They let us use all their tunes. So thanks, guys.
Musical-life.net.
That's the one. Check
Brilliant.
it out. If you're interested in this, there's loads more tunes and music. If you're interested in this period, there's loads of stuff there. So check it out.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Thanks, guys.
So Ryan, I know you've had a lovely time in the city.
Austria's been great so far.
I wonder though, this has all been the urban metropolis, busy Vienna. I wonder if you want to kind of get out and check out the countryside a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, so
Jump on a hay wagon.
jump on a hay wagon, sir, and get yourself into the Alps. Obviously, what we've heard is sort of generic, I would say generic, classic, medieval. You could really be in a lot. It could have been in France, really, for a lot of that, I feel. But here's a sound that really is much more specific to the area. You've gone into the Alps. You're going to stop off in a little village, and you might hear a sound like this. It's a yodel. A yodeling man calling to his cattle across the pasture. So that's
Nice.
That's yodeling. Yodeling is much more specific to this region, so I thought it'd be worth a little journey into that. A little bit Swiss as well, obviously, because it's alpine particularly. Used by most experts agree, it was used in the Central Alps, particularly by herders calling to their what do you call a cattle?
Herd?
A herd, that's the thing. A flock of cows.
A murder of cows.
Or to call between villages, maybe. It's very much specific to this region in a way that other music we were listening to is a bit more general.
Okay.
The earliest record we have of a yodel is 1545, where it's described as the call of a cowherd from Appenzell.
Okay, so this isn't quite our period then.
Well, no, it's until today. So this is an ongoing tradition. Yodeling then goes... It actually originated in lots of different places, but yodeling is a particular association with the Alps. Then weirdly, it becomes a thing that cowboys do in the 20s in America.
Yeah, well, how does that fit in with polka? Why do I think of those two things as being quite similar?
Because they're quite Bavarian. They're quite specific to this region. Polka, and mercifully, the accordion has not yet been invented, but you'd often get an accordion in the background of your yodeling.
Okay.
And that kind of... They're all from this reasonably similar area. So
Okay.
that's why you're putting those together, I think. And yodeling is frequently, in modern days particularly, to a modern ear, is kind of a comic sound, I think.
Uh-huh.
People don't go, I've bought myself a yodeling record. It's a sort of fun, but not particularly... I don't think people take it seriously, yodeling as an art form, I don't think. And it's very out of fashion. In American country music, yodeling was very much a part of it for quite a long time. And it was not hilarious at that time. It was just the sound of the place. But I did come across this, which I think is a slightly different take on yodeling, which is a bit more melodic and musical, I think. Something a little bit unexpected if you were to call it yodeling.
It's also sort of nonsense words as well, isn't it? He's not actually saying anything.
No, it's just
to his
sounds,
flock.
I
It's
think.
not
It's
like,
the
come over
tune,
here,
yeah.
come over here. He's just, Lord, 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 Lord.
I think it's more like using your voice as a bugle, right? So a bugle would be giving different commands based on the pitch of the sound rather than the syllables itself.
See, now I've got all interested in yodeling. I'm going to have to look this up. So do you think that they had the same tune and the same yodel? Like you could write it down and it would be the same each time?
I think the different yodels had different meanings, and
Okay.
there were calls that had different effects, much like you would have a bugle call that said retreat and one that said charge. You'd have a yodel that said bring the cows home and one that said we're out of milk. I assume they were jaw-based, I don't know.
Okay.
So yeah, I just wanted to listen to this one, which is still yodeling, but something that you don't think of, I think, so much when you think yodeling. The close harmony yodeling form.
You can't see my face, but I'm frowning and moving my eyebrows around.
Quizzical is the word I would use
Yeah.
to that expression, right? Sort of a choral yodel there. I thought that was interesting to come across.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
That
Okay.
was the whole thing.
I don't know if there was more
Oh, right,
coming.
no, there's no more rabbits in hats or anything.
All right. Well, then it falls on me to say that was amazing.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
That was so much fun.
I struggled a bit at the beginning, but the last couple of days it was coming together. I was quite excited.
We should end on a yodel. That's the classic one, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah. I wonder why that one's the classic one. That's
Easy,
it's
isn't it?
bound to be
It's
some.
It's beginner yodel.
movie
Yodeling
or something.
101.
Yeah, no, this was great. I really, really enjoyed this one. Okay, well, then here we go. It's that time of the episode.
Okay.
You love this bit because it's not you for a week.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the Derslater is awake.
All right.
All right, so here we go. Let's activate it. And the country for me next week is Liechtenstein.
Wow. Well, let's have a look at
So
the...
there's Liechtenstein.
Well, the history happened everywhere, Ryan. We know this.
Okay, all right, so let's go with the years then. Okay, here we go. And the years are Right, well, we're continuing the medieval stage. It's 1100 to 1200.
Ooh, yes.
We're travelling back in time slowly.
We are
the past three
gradually-
episodes has been 1500s, right back to the 1200s. Okay, so it is Liechtenstein between the years of 1100 to 1200.
What is the topic, Ryan?
The topic is...
It's going to be
no.
space. Something crazy.
And the topic is business.
Ooh,
That's the first time we've had business.
that is.
Okay, I figure business is going to be trading of corn and, animals.
People need things. Trade will occur.
It will. In Liechtenstein, of all places.
Oh, well, famously businessy.
I'm thinking already.
Good, because you have a week to keep thinking and come back and entertain me for a solid hour.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this will be our first one of 2021.
It will. So I think this is probably a good time to firstly wish all of our listeners an absolutely tremendous new year. Hope you'll have an amazing time celebrating the new year, and your next year is absolutely fabulous. Likely to be better than the last one, let's be honest. Thank you for listening. If you do want to send us any feedback, if you thought anything was wrong, if you thought it was right, if it excited you, if it angered you, do let us know. We're on hhepodcast@gmail.com.
That's right.
Or you can go to Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and just do HHE Podcast. We're out there.
And don't forget The Verdict, which will be following this podcast shortly, where our resident reviewer, Paul Dursley, will join us to give us his overview and grading on how well he thinks that we've achieved.
He doesn't like us.
Not very much.
He doesn't.
No. Wow, you said that was sincere. Okay, let's end this thing. Pete, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
That was
Ryan.
an amazing episode. Really enjoyed it.
I enjoy being here, sir.
And thanks to everyone you've been listening to. History happened everywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, gather round and prepare to hear the sound of the future.
Ooh, okay.
We all enjoy the rich, harmonious sound of the hurdy-gurdy.
Oh, I love the hurdy-gurdy.
Well, I have much improved and present to you today the hurdy-gurdy 2.
Ooh, all right.
First, we crank the crank like the hurdy-gurdy.
Okay.
We lower the strings.
Yep.
Now lubricate the slide arm.
Ooh, okay.
Start the bellows. Engage the drivetrain. And lower the armature. And now, the hurdy-gurdy 2.
Boo, it's rubbish.
Oh, you don't understand. This is the sound of the future. Your kids are going to love it, I promise. Well, my name isn't Wolfgang von Stratocaster.